There are crimes that fade with time. Names blur. Dates are forgotten. But some stories cling to a city like smoke. Austin, Texas, a place known for its music, its culture, its calm, still trembles beneath the weight of one of the most brutal unsolved crimes in American history. It happened on a Friday night, just before Christmas in 1991. 4 teenage girls, full of life and promise, were found tied, shot, and burned inside a local yogurt shop. The air would never smell the same again. It began quietly, as horror often does. December 6th, a chill lingered in the air. At a small strip mall off West Anderson Lane, I Can't Believe It's Yogurt was closing for the night. 2 high school seniors, Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Harbison, worked the late shift. Jennifer's 15-year-old sister Sarah and her 13-year-old friend, Amy Ayers, stopped by to wait for a ride home. 4 girls, all local, all trusted, all too young to sense what was coming. The store was small, the kind of place that offered light desserts and light conversation. Its pastel counters and cheerful signs felt sterile, safe. No one in the shop that night could have imagined that the same space would be a crime scene before sunrise. That within hours, it would be blackened with soot, reeking of gasoline and gunpowder, carrying the faintest trace of scorched sugar and hair. Around 11:48 p.m., a police patrol noticed smoke rising from the roof. Firefighters arrived swiftly. The flames weren't massive, but inside, they found something darker than fire. In the back of the store, partially covered in debris, lay the burned remains of 4 teenage girls. They were naked from the waist down, their hands tied behind their backs with items of clothing. They had been shot execution style. 3 of them were clustered together. One was found separately near the restroom. The blaze had been deliberately set. Only one of the girls had still been alive when the fire started. Amy Ayers, just 13 years old. Evidence suggested she had been shot once and survived, then shot again. That final bullet took her life. The scene was calculated and monstrous. There were signs of sexual assault, though damage from the fire complicated the analysis. Bullets had been fired from 2 different guns. The motive appeared confused, staged as a robbery, but with a brutality far beyond anything explainable. Austin changed that night. The city known for its rhythm, for its easygoing peace, fell into a state of stunned panic. Parents looked at their daughters differently. Small businesses double-locked their doors. Schools held grief circles. Churches filled with candlelight and questions. Who could do such a thing to 4 girls, all under the age of 18, and walk away? In the early days, the investigation moved fast, but uncertainly. Dozens of suspects were questioned. Tips poured in. False confessions, as always happens in cases of this scale, clouded the search. One man claimed to have killed the girls as part of a satanic ritual. Another said he'd been hired to do it. Neither knew details that aligned with the evidence. DNA was collected, but in 1991, forensic science was still crude. Matches were elusive. Mistakes were made. One possible lead emerged early on. A 16-year-old named Morris Pierce was stopped by police shortly after the murders, carrying a .22 caliber pistol, the same caliber used in one of the shootings. But the weapon turned out not to match, and without other evidence, he was let go. He would resurface in the story years later. As the months stretched into years, the case turned cold. Murmurs of incompetence began to rise. Evidence had been mishandled. The scene had been compromised by the fire and by the early arrival of responders. Families began to doubt that justice would ever come. The media returned to the story on anniversaries, each year bringing no resolution, only grief wrapped in questions. Then, in 1999, 8 long years later, a sudden twist reignited everything. Police announced that 4 men had been arrested in connection with the murders. Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Morris Pierce, and Forrest Welborn. They had been teens at the time of the crime. Now in their 20s, living scattered lives, they were swept back into the storm. Interrogations began. One by one, under intense pressure and long hours of questioning, two of the men, Scott and Springsteen, confessed. They claimed the crime had started as a robbery gone wrong, that things had spiraled, that in panic they had tied up the girls, shot them, set the place on fire. The details were murky, inconsistent, even contradictory. But in the absence of other leads, the confessions carried weight. Springsteen and Scott were tried separately, convicted, one sentenced to death, the other to life in prison. Pierce and Welborn were not prosecuted due to lack of evidence. It seemed, for a brief moment, that justice, however imperfect, had arrived. But the cracks were immediate. The confessions defense attorneys argued had been coerced. No lawyers had been present during key parts of the interrogations. The statements were riddled with errors, names wrong, sequence wrong, even weapons wrong. More damning. There was no physical evidence tying any of the men to the crime scene. No fingerprints. No DNA, nothing. Then, in 2008, the ground gave way entirely. Advanced DNA testing on vaginal swabs, preserved from the original investigation, revealed a male DNA profile that did not match any of the four accused. The evidence had been there all along. It simply hadn't been testable until now. The two convicted men, Springsteen and Scott, were released. Charges were dropped. Austin exhaled, not in relief, but in exhaustion. And the case? Once again, cold. Today, more than 3 decades later, the yogurt shop is long gone. The building has been remodeled, the name changed. But the memory, it lingers. A shrine once stood there for months, covered in flowers, letters, and photos of the girls in happier moments. Softball games, birthday parties, school dances. Eliza, Jennifer, Sarah, and Amy became symbols of everything lost too soon, of a justice system too flawed to bring resolution. Despite years of reinvestigation, public pressure, and even a resurgence of interest in true crime media, the yogurt shop murders remain unsolved. DNA profiles from the crime have still not been matched to any known individual. Suspects have come and gone. The original case file now fills multiple boxes in a city archive, and yet the final chapter remains unwritten. In 2025, HBO announced a new documentary series revisiting the case. It promises new interviews, unseen footage, and forensic re-examinations. Families of the victims remain cautiously hopeful, but they've heard it all before. What do you do with a wound that never heals? You remember. You ask again. You shine light where darkness clings longest. The story of the yogurt shop murders isn't just about 4 innocent girls stolen in the night. It's about how a city reacts to evil, how a justice system can fail, how truth, no matter how long buried, still whispers through the ashes. If you found this story important, subscribe for more unsolved investigations and deep dives into America's coldest cases. And if you know anything about what happened that night in Austin, speak up, because silence is how killers get away with murder.